All right, we shift our focus to this story now. President Cyril Ramaphosa is about to launch phase 2 of the Business and Government Partnership. The partnership was established over a year ago with the aim of securing progress in energy, transport and logistics and combating of crime and corruption as enablers of economic growth and the creation of jobs. We take you live now. Let's listen in.
To rollout of the partnership. The first thing to say, certainly from our perspective, is the partnership has been an unequivocal success. It's been remarkable. We're grateful to the President for the leadership, to government, to our colleagues here. We've come a long way in just a year. It's quite incredible how different things feel a year later. A lot of things have changed. And this partnership has been different and special. I wanted to make the point to you, just from our perspective, why the partnership was different. Of course, it's a partnership with BUSA, organised business and government, from our perspective. But the architecture, the construct, was about bringing CEOs to the front of this. And that was very important. It brought individuals, it brought organisations, it brought commitment, it brought resources, and it created a very different dynamic. And the mechanism we used initially was a very kind of soft idea of a pledge, as you can see on the top of the slide there, that getting CEOs to pledge their commitment to the potential of the country. Why it's important is at the time a year ago, the narrative was very different, very negative, very concerned. People were in despair, load shedding was very high, and to an extent there was a very different mindset. The pledge forced this idea of a commitment to the potential of the country and being a force for good. And I tell you from business side, it was easy to get it signed. The commitment of CEOs was just remarkable, quick, easy, no second thoughts, and that's amazing. So we started out with a pledge, and you can see the scale of commitment, the number of companies, the number of CEOs involved in the process. It started very, very well. But the manifestation of it was a very structured approach. 3 distinct focal areas, 3 distinct streams: energy, transport and logistics, and then crime and corruption. There was a lot of other debates with our counterparts in government about other potential streams, but the feeling was those 3 made the most sense, and we soon started to look at the research, and you can see from the chart a number of heuristics about the effect on GDP growth and what could be done, and obviously what's happening now if we don't solve load shedding, the effect on GDP, crime and corruption. All of this took place. I'm not sure the numbers are additive, but there was enough for us to realize that if we could solve these 3 areas collectively, we could make a massive difference. And so from a soft pledge was a focus on 3 distinct focal areas. I think one of the important things to me in the partnership, and again credit to our counterparts in government, was a focus on kind of taking something down to a unit of currency and getting focus on that. So gigawatts on the grid, megatons through the network, the FATF issue, crime and corruption is a much more complex, amorphous issue. But the focus down to a unit of currency helped, I think, the structures, and then very importantly, juxtaposing a pledge to a very well-governed process. And I think the governance has been a critical issue. NECOM, NLCC, JIC, those committees established, and of course under the leadership of the President, where there was cadence, discipline. We met every 8 weeks. And so it started out as a very soft pledge, turned into a very well-governed process, and allowed us to deploy considerable resources, over 300 experts into the various streams with real progress. And of course, the kind of signature, the massive achievement of collectively turning the corner of load shedding, as the Minister earlier said. So an amazing achievement in that first phase. We've come a long way. A lot of lessons learned, certainly from my perspective, and I'm sure my colleagues feel the same, the sense that you can make a change quickly. I don't think when we started out we would have sensed we could make the difference collectively so quickly. So it kind of gave us a sense of confidence. The other I would say is it's a fantastic model for developing economies, where you're bringing kind of expertise together and you're getting real traction. And so it really has been a fantastic first phase. We're now in a different position in the country. Things are different. It's amazing. Things feel completely different. And there's a sense of a point of inflection. President, you spoke about an era of potential great new promise. That's a real framing of where we need to kind of capitalize on that opportunity. And so we really need to use the opportunity to accelerate the partnership. So we are determined from business to try and push this forward, to do more. And I know from the government side we're getting the same kind of commitment, and we have to actually capitalize on that. Our feeling now is that the first phase was kind of bottom-up, focus on 3 streams, and the strong belief that that will turn the flywheel for growth and that would create jobs over time. And that was kind of the architecture thinking at the time. The second phase is maybe the same areas of focus, and they're complex, but maybe a top-down approach. And our thinking is this virtuous cycle of growth, jobs, narrative. All of them kind of feed on each other. And can we achieve that? Can we achieve economic growth? If we do, we know from the research the country does produce jobs. There's a lot of initiatives on specific job creation, but the fundamental driver, we need to create economic growth to create jobs. Economic growth and jobs create a better narrative, and that I think is well known. What often isn't appreciated is that narrative causes economic growth. And that causal effect is often, not really acceptable. I urge you, when you look at the research, narrative is a fundamental issue. Turns out that in developing economies, there's a lot of noise about asset prices. And so you get this confusion between fundamentals and sentiment. So if sentiment is bad, it kind of pulls growth down. If sentiment is good, it pulls growth up. And I think we've had the opposite problem. Sentiment has always been worse than reality. And so we need to deal with the sentiment. And so our strong view is getting the cycle to turn is really the focus of phase 2. Growth, jobs, narrative. And there's really massive potential there. Of course, the question is, how much growth do we need? Obviously, the more the better in a sense. SARB, I think, is predicted 1.6% in 2025. That assumes, it is what it is now. And of course, that's an very educated view. I know the Bureau of Economic Research has predicted 2.2%. That assumes that some of the reforms come through and a number of different things are done, and that's important. Our feeling, and this is a very stretched target, can we get over 3% by 2025? What would that take? 3% is a very important threshold. We know from the numbers that above 3% the economy really does produce a considerable number of jobs. So getting over 3% is important. When you're down at 0 to 1, you're losing jobs, and that's a problem. So getting over 3 is a critical thing. And the question is, can we do it? We think we can, and that's the stretch. So you'll see later in the presentation from our colleagues, there's a lot of plans in place that we're setting out to achieve. But there's some targets there kind of at the pinnacle or top of the pile that are really stretched. We are saying, can we add a further 4 gigawatts of renewable energy to the grid? That will require that extra 1 gigawatt above what's planned is a 23 billion investment. That's a big thing. In terms of transport and logistics, can we get to 193 megatons? That's a massive stretch. 170 megatons, I think, is in the plan. That in itself is a massive stretch. But if we can do that, the effect would be dramatic. Can we get off the fat of grey list? We think we can. It's a critical issue. So these are very stretched targets, and the question is, do they get us over 3%? So we worked with the Bureau of Economic Research to model these scenarios. They did that. They looked at also some spend on water to make sure that the infrastructure is reliable. In addition, they looked at sentiment, and they looked back on the 2014 sentiment and put that into their models. And you do get over 3%. You get 3.3% if we achieve this. So I'm putting it out there. It's a massive stretch, but then any load shedding was a massive stretch. This can be done if we really push very, very hard. But the prize here is massive. We've done the numbers through the model BR, did the numbers on job creation. Turns out you can see on the bottom there that if we do manage to achieve over 3% growth, the economy will generate 2.5 million jobs by 2029. That's huge. And when you think about the fact that every job supports 2 or 3 people, you're looking at 8 to 10 million people affected. It's a real change. So our hope in this phase 2 is setting out very stretched goals. These are really asymptotic if we can achieve them. But if we do, the prize is big. And so we are committed to doing it. We need the commitment, obviously, of our counterparty in the partnership. We know there's commitment there. We need the commitment of the CEOs here. We need resources. We need commitment. We dare fail in this because going below 3% has a pernicious effect. So we need to get above the 3%. We believe we can. The country's in a different place. We've got a lot of success, precedent, good trust, good faith. This is an opportunity. So let me end there and kind of frame the phase 2 that we're on. And just thank you for all that's been done, and just an appeal for help in resources, for help in commitment, and especially to you, President. Thanks for the leadership. We're looking to more of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, for that wonderful presentation. I think, colleagues, you've seen that Adrian flashed a slide around companies or CEOs that has made the pledge. And because we've got members of the media, he didn't mention the number of CEOs that made the pledge. It's 130 CEOs that pledged to work with us during the 6th administration, and we're hoping that number will go higher. And through that initiative, we were able to raise 350 experts that were raised by business to support the various streams of this partnership. And I thought I need to give that detail out so that when the media says how many CEOs, they can talk to a number. And I hope those who are from the media, you have noticed the CEOs from the companies themselves who are here. And a friend of mine said they were overwhelmed because when you turned, it was the CEO of one company. You turn the other side, is a minister. And you turn the other side, it's important people. So they were really overwhelmed, Mr. President. And this work that were done by the streams that Adrian had indicated, your NICOM, your NLCC, your GICC, that work was coordinated on our part jointly from a joint strategic operations committee, thus ensuring that at all material times we are aligned and we are accountable to what we have committed to do. Because there's always been a question to say, is business and government aligned at all times? We are aligned fully. And to give that message of alignment, I'll now invite the Director General of the Republic of South Africa, Mrs. Pindile Paleni, and Mr. Martin Kingston to come and make a presentation of the work done and the future. Thank you. Let's see, is this working? Okay. Thank you, Minister.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. His Excellency President Ramaphosa, Ministers of Government, CEOs of companies, leadership of organized business, good afternoon to yourselves. We are here to present the content of the work that was done under the partnership between government and business that started, as Adrian indicated, about a year and a half ago. The government reform agenda helped shape the partnership's objectives. So in the 6th administration, shortly after the 2019 elections and in the midst of COVID, if we still remember that time, it became clear to the government of the day that we needed to conduct some structural reforms in order to just jumpstart the economy of the country because it wasn't moving fast. A joint initiative between the presidency and National Treasury called Operation Vulindlela was created, and it identified a few areas, 5 areas that they were going to focus on in order to kickstart the economy, as indicated. So firstly, it was about the regulatory changes to enable private investment in electricity generation. Secondly, it related to the spectrum, that long outstanding spectrum that needed to be auctioned. That was done and concluded. There were issues around the visas and our ability to attract top skills, particularly for the people in this room. The reform process started around the visas. Water use licenses were also delaying a lot of businesses from kickstarting and getting the rents rolling in investments. So that licensing backlog was cleared, and it unlocked, as I said, billions in investments. And finally, there was an issue of allowing the private sector to participate in the container terminals in order to ensure that we improve the efficiency of the terminals and that the goods move. That was the reform agenda that government had identified, but it helped shape the objectives of partnership with business. And in the end, when we got together with business, there are 3 focal areas that were identified, and Adrian has referred to them. It was energy, transport and logistics, as well as crime and corruption. In relation to energy, we had a few objectives again, 6. So broadly, it was about accelerating market reform for long-term energy security, as well as ensuring a competitive economy. What were our objectives? First and foremost, because we're in the midst of load shedding, was to fix Eskom and improve the availability of existing supply, while decommissioning inefficient capacity, but that also had come to the end of its life. Secondly, enabling and accelerating the private investment in generation process. So the process had started in a series of bid windows that had been opened, There's a particular window that didn't work so well, Window 6, bid Window 6, and we needed to make sure that we fast-track that process through the next window, which was Window 7. Fourthly, we needed to incentivize business and households to invest in rooftop solar in order to ensure that we augment the megawatts and we augment available electricity in the country. And there were issues relating to tariffs as well as net metering that needed to be sorted out. And the fifth objective was to fundamentally transform the electricity sector in South Africa to make sure that we open it up, we strengthen the regulator, we establish a wholesale market that's competitive of generators, an independent system operator and market operator, and then on the other end, modernizing and reconfiguring the distribution industry. Whilst in that process, we then realized that we had a problem of the transmission capacity. So generation was not working too well, and then transmission was also blocked. So we then identified an objective, the last one, which related to strengthening and expanding our transmission network. Our ambitions, clear, and very clear for the next year. So we ran for the first phase during the 6th administration. In the 7th administration, commitment as well was expressed to continue with this partnership. And here are our targets, making sure that we add 4 gigawatts of additional generation capacity to our grid and build 1,000 kilometers of transmission lines. This is in 2025. We then identified a second area of logistics where the goods in the country were not moving as effectively as they could. So with the overall objective of improving Transnet's performance, as well as enabling private sector operators to participate in order to increase rail and port volumes needed for economic growth. Again, there, 6 objectives were identified. It does look like 6 is a magic number. So firstly, again, because there was non-performance on the part of the main state-owned entity, it was about making sure that we assist Transnet to improve its operational performance, including implementing its breakthrough projects. And we needed to then quickly mobilize quick wins teams that were going to consolidate and ensure that operational oversight was possible to ensure that we improve the tonnage that was being moved by Transnet. The next 3 objectives really relate to private sector participation. So it was private investment through third-party concessions underpinned by an updated network statement relating to both rail as well as the ports. And the last objective really related to ensuring that the regulation of the logistics industry in the country is consolidated and put in one place, and we don't have different regulators regulating different parts of the transport value chain. So the transport economic regulator was then created through the passing of a particular law. We are now going to be operationalizing that through making sure that we recruit appropriate skills as well as expertise. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to my co-conspirator, Martin, who's going to speak to the balance of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, DG, President, ministers, business leaders. I've never been referred to as a co-conspirator before, so. As the DG has said, really this has been about focusing on a limited number of areas where we can make meaningful and significant interventions and address the challenges that the country has, and we know very well what they are. There was enormous pressure, by the way, to increase the number of focus areas, but we've been steadfast in our pursuit of the 3 that have been identified, although we may well expand that if the opportunity arises going forwards. And crime and corruption applies both to the areas we've talked about, specifically energy and transport and logistics, but more broadly the private sector as well as society at large. And we felt that there was an opportunity to leverage private sector skills and expertise, particularly in...
All right, live visuals there from Sandton. This is where they're launching the phase 2 of the business and government partnership. A number of CEOs gathered there